I want to welcome everyone who's joined us today, those of you who are watching, those of you who are online. Thank you for joining us. This is a special update because prophecy has told us that the final movements will be rapid ones. And things are happening very quickly, and we want to give you a bite-sized, concise overview of what events are coming up and how that compares with prophecy. So before we begin, let's have a word of prayer. Our gracious and heavenly Father, you are so wonderful to have shown us in advance what is yet to take place so that we can be prepared. We won't be afraid. We don't need to be in fear. And we can know that you will take care of us and protect us because of your promises. So bless us now. Speak through me that the audience, the viewers, will have the truth as it comes from you. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So let me first give you an introduction to what prophecy has said a number of years ago, and we'll compare that with what is actually happening today. So a long time ago, probably about 100 years ago, Ellen White wrote in The Spirit of Prophecy that we are standing upon the threshold of great and solemn events. The whole earth is to be lightened with the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the channels of the great deep. Prophecies are being fulfilled, and stormy times are before us. You know, many smiled and would not believe us when we told them maybe 20 and 30 years ago that the Sunday law would be urged upon all the world, and a law would be made to compel its observance and force the conscience. We see it being fulfilled, and all that God has said of the future will surely come to pass. Not one thing will fail of all that he has spoken. She goes on to say that Protestantism is now reaching hands across the gulf to clasp hands with the papacy. And a confederacy is being formed to trample out of sight the Sabbath of the fourth commandment. Men have become bold in their transgression. You can see wickedness on every side. The wickedness of the inhabitants of the world has almost filled up the measure of their iniquity. And the substitution of the laws of men for the law of God, the exaltation by merely human authority of Sunday in place of the Bible Sabbath, is the last act in the drama. And when this substitution becomes universal, God will reveal himself. He will arise in his majesty to shake terribly the earth. So what did we see so far? We saw that there is going to be a confederacy. Men are bold in their transgression. We see wickedness just fruitful, just happening everywhere we see. And the last act in the drama before Jesus comes is a universal Sunday law. She says in 9 Testimonies, page 11, that the agencies of evil are combining their forces and consolidating. They're combining their forces and consolidating. They are strengthening for the last great crisis, and great changes are soon to take place in our world. And the final movements will be rapid ones. So let's take a look at what is actually happening. If we look at the current news, it says on the Vatican website that Pope Francis will intervene in the G7 summit in Italy's southern Puglia region in the session devoted to artificial intelligence. This is happening this month, June 13th to the 15th in Borgo Egnazia, Italy. This is happening. So what is that all about? Who is the G7? The G7, if most of you don't know who they are, is the group of 7 industrialized nations in the world, the biggest nations in the world, the most powerful nations who are industrialized. So who are they? They are the United States, Canada, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, and Japan. And so this G7 summit is primarily put together to call for an agreement. So what did prophecy just tell us would happen? Told us that they are consolidating and gathering their forces together, strengthening themselves for the final act in the drama. So what they tell us on the website is that the Italian government intends to enhance the contribution given by the Holy See on the issue of artificial intelligence, particularly with the Rome Call for AI Ethics of 2020, promoted by the Pontifical Academy for Life, in a process that leads to the concrete application of the concept of algorithmic ethics, namely giving ethics to algorithms. So the Pope has called for an international treaty, otherwise known as a confederacy, to ensure that AI is developed and used ethically. Now, in the Great Controversy, page 566, she states that while Romanism is based on deception, it is not a coarse and clumsy imposture. So, can we believe that the Vatican is calling for AI to be used ethically? Maybe on the outside, in the outside external world, but I don't believe that they have plans to use it ethically inside their circle. Let's go on. The Vatican's bioethics think tank is called the Pontifical Academy for Life, and it has also led a campaign to engage big tech corporations, academic institutions, and non-governmental organizations to pledge or agree to uphold a set of standards in the ethical development and use of AI. And Cisco Systems is the latest company that has signed on just this week, according to Associated Press. The gospel is now resolutely opposed on every hand, and never was the confederacy of evil greater than at the present time. So we see the G7 summit that is coming up. They're looking to confederate on how they're going to use AI. And you know, AI is, I believe the plan there is to use it universally, worldwide, so that they can control every single person on the planet. Can you imagine if that was up to just individuals where they had to monitor, let's say, a group of people? You'd have to have thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to manage the entire planet. But with artificial intelligence, you can do that with just a massive set of computers or a farm of computers. AI could keep track of every single individual and punish them for not doing what they want them to do, and prevent them from doing things, shut off their bank accounts, everything automatically based on algorithms. So this is what's coming up, folks. In further writings of Ellen White, she says the spirits of darkness combined with human agencies set themselves firmly against the commandments of God. So they're going to set themselves against the fourth commandment of God, which is the Sabbath worship. They confederate together to make of no effect the law of God. So, you know, go with me to Daniel chapter 11, and if you have read this before, verses 36 through 38, and I have, and I looked at it and I thought, I don't know exactly what that means. Well, let's see what it says, and it may be that we have kind of a glimpse of what it might mean. So in Daniel 11:36, it says, and the king, or the king of the north, in this case we know it's the Pope that's being talked about, he shall do according to his will and shall exalt himself. And then in verse 37 it says, neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. And in verse 38, this is the one that perplexed me. It says, but in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold, silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. So, as I'm looking at what is going to take place with the AI, the G7 summit talking about AI, I'm thinking, could this God of forces, a God whom the forefathers knew not, be AI? Is AI, or artificial intelligence, the God whom his fathers knew not? It could be. Okay, coming up this fall, the Pope will attend the United Nations Summit of the Future on September 10 through 24 this year, 2024. And what is their goal? It says to improve cooperation. There's a different way of saying confederate or agree or let's work together. To improve cooperation on critical challenges and address gaps in global governance. And member states will consider ways to lay the foundations for more effective global cooperation. So what they really mean is they're going to set up a stronger confederacy to force cooperation between all nations. All right, so what is going on with climate change? Last month, May 16th, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, spoke at the Vatican Climate Summit, highlighting California's climate leadership and called for greater global partnership and urged world leaders to protect democracy against the rise of extremism and in the face of climate deniers. So not only are they asking for global partnership again, or a confederacy, but they are actually want to go one step further and put down anybody who would talk against climate change and actually focus with portraying the truth, presenting the truth. And they want to pass laws against climate deniers, they call them. What does it say in Evangelism, page 236? It says, the law of God, through the agency of Satan, is to be made void. In our land of boasted freedom, religious liberty will come to an end. So it's coming to an end, and it's coming to an end quickly. In Wikipedia, it says that Christian nationalists focus more on internal politics, such as passing laws that reflect their view of Christianity, and in countries with a state church, Christian nationalists, in seeking to preserve the status of a Christian state, uphold what's called an anti-disestablishmentarianism position. Okay, well, let's dive down into that word for a second. What is anti-disestablishmentarianism? I believe it's purportedly one of the largest words in the English language. This word, anti-disestablishmentarianism, is a position that it advocates that a state church or the established church should continue to receive government patronage rather than be disestablished or be separated from the state. The Christian nationalists, promote religious or Christian discourses in various fields of social life, from politics and history to culture and science, with respect to legislation. And for example, they say in Wikipedia that Christian nationalists advocate Sunday blue laws. So here, folks, if we get in there and look to see what's happening, if we dive in and investigate for ourselves, we will uncover the revelations that they are revealing to us, or the things that they're going to do. So also we've got to look. We just need to be the watchman on the wall. Incidentally, Christian nationalism is just another fancy way of referring to the combination of church and state. All right, so let's talk about some political leaders that are prominent in the news right now. Everyone knows about Donald Trump. In February 22, he actually spoke at the Network of Religious Broadcasting Convention in Nashville, Tennessee. And there he revealed that in his first term, he paused what's called the Johnson Amendment. And the Johnson Amendment is a bill that prohibited anyone in a church, such as a pastor or lay people, to actually get up front and promote any political narrative, any political position, any political party, on punishment of being de-established as a nonprofit organization, and so they would have to start paying taxes. So he paused that. Okay, this is a very key item. This allows the religious folks to actually start talking politics. In other words, it's allowing them to, it's allowing the church and the state to start coming closer together. He promised to make this permanent so that Christians can speak and do things, in his words, they've never done before. He said Christians have to have a political voice. Religion has more power than men and women. He said to them in this convention, he says, you have such power, but you were not allowed to use that power, and you're now allowed to use it. If I get in there, back into office, you're going to be using that power at a level that you've never used before. Little does he know that how he is predicting the fulfillment of prophecy, where church and state coming back together in the short future will have a powerful impact to silence, censor, terminate employment on people, and cut off your bank accounts unless you do what they want you to do. He said it's going to bring back the churchgoer. We're going to bring it back, and I really believe it's the biggest thing missing from this country. He says we have to bring back religion and we have to bring back Christianity in this country. He said, when I was in office, I supported school prayer, and now listen to his next words, which we forced. He forced school prayer. Unfortunately, had to force, he says, into some schools. You would think it would be very easy, he said, but it wasn't. But we did it. He forced it. He says, I signed an executive order to install faith advisors in every federal department and agency so that your voice, the church voice, the religious voice, and the Christian worldview would be heard in the halls of power in Washington and all over the world. It was a very big deal, he said. This is pretty bold, I would say. What we know is that the United States is that power represented by the beast with lamb-like horns. That's in Revelation chapter 13. And this prophecy will be fulfilled when the United States shall enforce Sunday observance. And prophecy does foretell a restoration of Rome's powers. It's found in Revelation 13, verses 3 and 5. It says, I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. Remember, the deadly wound occurred in 1798 when he was taken out of power by Napoleon's army, went into Rome and actually took the Pope prisoner, and he died in prison. But it says that that deadly wound is going to be healed. It says, I saw as one of his, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. Then in verse 5 it says, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. Well, 42 months, if you break that down, is 3.5 years. So Rome will be promoted to power to rule the world again as a one world government for 3.5 years coming up. Trump went on to say that when I get into office, I will create a federal task force on fighting anti-Christian bias. Well, those are pretty bold words also to say that if anybody goes against what the Christians want, then there will be a federal task force to go after those people. Well, that means that if you and I don't go along with a lot of their legislation or go along with the Sunday law and worship on Sunday, then there will be a task force that will deal with people like us. Its mission will be to investigate all forms of illegal discrimination, harassment, and persecution against Christians in America. And we will work to reverse the decline of organized religion and church-going in America. Well, you see what he said earlier. He said, I had to force prayer in the schools, and we did it. So his version of getting people to go back to church is also going to be forced. You'll be forced to go back to church, and that day is going to be none other than Sunday. According to the New Yorker magazine, now this is also very disconcerting to me, but according to the New Yorker magazine, on May 9th, 2018, Trump was quoted as calling the U.S. Constitution maybe the worst deal ever. I've seen a lot of bad deals in my life, but this Constitution is a total mess, he said. We need to tear it up and start over. The article goes on to say that Trump was scathing in his remarks about the 229-year-old document, singling out for special scorn its insistence on 3 branches of government. Well, we all know, if any of us have studied the Constitution of the United States, we know that having 3 branches of government prevents a dictatorship from getting out of control. So it's called checks and balances. They check each other and they balance out so that no one branch of government has total unilateral power. But he said that this branches thing is maybe the worst part of the deal. How can that be? If he's elected president, he's supposed to uphold the Constitution, not tear it down, not be against it. He says the first thing we do when we pull out of the Constitution is get rid of those two branches. And you know what it says in 5 Testimonies, page 451? It says, by the decree enforcing the institution of the papacy, which is Sunday, in violation of the law of God, our country shall repudiate every principle of its constitution as a Protestant and Republican government. So we see that Trump is fulfilling prophecy. He is against the Constitution, according to the New Yorker magazine. I'm not saying it, but I'm just quoting to you what the New Yorker magazine interviewed him in 2018, that he is against the Constitution, and prophecy told us, over 100 years ago, that our country will repudiate every principle of its Constitution. Now, Trump also went on to say that he called the First Amendment something that really has to go. No one in his right mind would put something like that in a constitution, he said. Russia doesn't have it. North Korea doesn't have it. All the best countries don't have it. Well, I tend to disagree with you, Mr. Trump. The best country in the world, the United States, has the right constitution and has that amendment because it preserves liberty of conscience. It preserves the freedom of people to choose whom they will worship based on their own conscience. And let me also say that the Christian nationalists are saying that the United States is a Christian nation, or they're referring to a Catholic Christian nation. And this is where they're also wrong. It was not founded on Catholic Christian principles, but it was founded on the freedom that people could worship any way they want to. They would not, in a church-established religion would not be formed by the state. That's what this nation was founded on, is the freedom to worship the way you want to and I want to. So what does the First Amendment say? This is very important. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So they can't establish a single church or stop us from worshiping or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble. So they can't stop us from going to church each week, to assemble. This is a fundamental right just born in us innately that God has given us. And this Constitution is simply upholding that right. The freedom to talk without being censored, freedom of the press, and the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So I have to say that Donald Trump kind of makes for a perfect Pope vice president. He's the perfect double. He could be an exact copy of the Pope, or you could call him a perfect mirror image of the beast, because he is forming or gathering together church or religion and state to enforce what the religion or the religious side wants. And this is what the papacy is all about. The Pope himself is both the Pontifex Maximus, or the king, and he is also the priest. He's the high priest who holds the number 666. So Trump wants to unite church and state, and he is against freedom of speech and against freedom of religion or the right of the people to peacefully assemble for worship if he is against the Constitution and the First Amendment specifically. All right, let's move on to a security strategist. His name is Michael Waller. He was just recently interviewed by Tucker Carlson. And he goes on to say in his interview that Congress is funding things that they know are unconstitutional. The Justice Department is enforcing things that its lawyers know are unconstitutional. And now you have the Transition Integrity Project writing the whole orchestra for the transition after November of this year to rip the Constitution to shreds. So here we have another individual who has worked for the CIA, he's worked for the government, and he's a security strategist now And this is what he is revealing to the world, is that they have plans to rip the Constitution to shreds. All right, stay with me. We're almost done. We're going to talk about Project 2025. If you haven't heard about that, that is also another playbook that has been put together by the Heritage Foundation. And they have a playbook that they want the president and the government to follow once they are elected. And this playbook is for the first 180 days or the first 6 months of the president's term, which means this coming January through June, they want these things to take place. And I'm not going to go through the whole 180-day playbook because there's a lot in there, but I want to focus you on one important topic, and that is their plan to pass a Sunday law within the first 180 days. In their mission statement, I'm going to read about halfway down. It says, "The Judeo-Christian tradition, stretching back to Genesis, has always recognized fruitful work as integral to human dignity, as service to God, neighbor, and family. And Americans have long been known for their work ethic. While it is primarily the culture's responsibility to affirm the dignity of work, our federal labor and employment agencies have an important role to play by protecting workers, setting boundaries for the healthy functioning of labor markets, and ultimately encouraging wages and conditions for jobs that can support a family." Okay, they go on to say that in chapter 18 of their Department of Labor, that God ordained the Sabbath as a day of rest. Can you imagine that? This is a secular document, and they're talking about Sabbath rest. God ordained the Sabbath as a day of rest, and until very recently, the Judeo-Christian tradition sought to honor that mandate by moral and legal regulation of work on that day. Moreover, a shared day off makes it possible for families and communities to enjoy time off together, rather than as atomized individuals, and provides a healthier cadence of life for everyone. Unfortunately, that communal day of rest has eroded under the pressures of consumerism and secularism, especially for low-income workers. They go on to say that Congress should encourage communal rest by amending the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA, to require that workers be paid time and a half for hours worked on the Sabbath. That day would default to Sunday, except for employers with a sincere religious observance of Sabbath at a different time, for example, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. The obligation would transfer to that period instead. So what are they really saying here? They're saying we want to pass a Sunday law. We're going to accommodate those such as Seventh-day Adventists or Seventh-day Baptists, or those people who believe sincerely in the fourth commandment, which has never been changed, that the true Sabbath is from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. They will accommodate them. But this, as we know, is only so they can get their foot in the door, and that provision will be ultimately taken away or discarded or eliminated. All right, so let's recap what we just covered. In summary, the G7 summit in June is to confederate everyone on the use of AI, and this will be led by the Pope. Big Tech has signed an agreement already with the Vatican that they will follow that mandate. The United Nations in September is holding the Summit of the Future to set up stronger confederacies among the nations of the earth. The Pope will be coming to New York for that summit. Climate change is being pushed as the cause of weather crisis, and taking a day off on Sundays is the solution. And they believe they must punish the dissenters. Christian nationalists, they are pushing their worldview of Catholic Christianity and are advocating a Sunday law in 2025. We read about Trump saying that Christians will have a political power they've never used before. We will bring back the churchgoer. We will use force to do it. And according to the New Yorker magazine, Trump is against the U.S. Constitution, and he wants to unite church and state by eliminating the First Amendment. Project 2025 has as one of its first 180-day goals to establish a Sunday law. This is by June 2025. So what I've just shown you is proof that we are here. We have arrived at the future. The future is here. The things that were prophesied hundreds of years ago are now taking action and are occurring. So we are at the very end of time predicted by God through the prophetic pages of Scripture. We don't need timelines anymore. We don't need them anymore. We no longer need a chronology to show us that this time is soon to arrive, because we have arrived. People who are against time setting can relax now. You guys can relax. There's no need to accuse your brethren of time setting. There's no more time setting needed, because these events show us that we are here. So what else are you waiting for to get prepared for what is to come upon the world as an overwhelming surprise? A great crisis that people will be in terror of. Have you gotten out of the cities? This is probably the biggest key factor right now that you can do to prepare for the times coming up, because God is going to punish the cities. We know that. We see that in history. God punished Sodom and Gomorrah. He punished other cities, like he was going to punish Nineveh. And Jonah went there and warned the inhabitants of Nineveh, and he didn't punish them. This is in the Bible. Just look in the Bible to see what God will do to the wicked cities of the world. So get out of the city. Now is your chance to do that. Do you have a garden? When you can't buy and sell, when they've cut you completely off, what are you going to eat? How are you going to consist? We will be totally and completely cut off from the world. There will be nothing that we can do with the world's help. It'll have to be done solely by ourselves and by God's grace and His strength and His power and His provision. All right, so based on what we just saw, could you credibly say that great changes are very likely to occur this fall and next year? So I have to say that the USA is currently at a point of great change. It's a presidential election year. Revelation 13 tells us that the USA will lead the world and cause everyone to receive the mark of the beast. That's a big change. It says, and he, the United States, causeth the earth and them which dwell therein, or everyone, to worship the first beast, which is Rome, the papacy, whose deadly wound was healed. Revelation 13, verse 12. So, can we say that great things are likely to occur? In volume 9 of the Testimonies, page 11, it says, great changes are soon to take place in our world, and the final movements will be rapid ones. So how can you prepare? How can I prepare? How can we prepare? Spiritually, personally. I have to tell you that if you are not totally committed to God, you will not survive. There's going to be so much confusion, so much chaos, bloodshed. You'll be ordered to obey. And if you are not solid on your commitment to God, you will not survive. You will give in. In Matthew 22:37, Jesus said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. He's asking us to be totally committed. And in addition to that, we must be totally dead to self. We've got to die to what we want, to what you want. Think about the things that you enjoy, the conveniences that you have, the things that you want to do. Is it what you want to do, or are you getting prepared to meet your God? In Matthew 16:24, Jesus said to his disciples, he said, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. This is what we must do to be prepared for the overwhelming things, overwhelming crises that are going to occur in the world coming up. You must be thinking, preparing, and moving into a place in the country now. Now, not next year, not when you get around to it, because it takes time to move. We all know that it takes time to move. If you've ever moved from one house to another, from one place to another, it takes a lot of time. The actual Sunday law will be the last call to get out of the cities. It's not to prepare to get out, it's you've got to get out when the Sunday law is passed, because you must flee immediately or suffer the crises that await those cities. They're going to be destroyed. They're going to have terrible things that happen to them. And God has been gracious to give us a warning message to get out now before it's too late, so that we don't have to incur the destruction and the calamities and the things that are going to happen in those cities. So the last verse I have for you from Spirit of Prophecy comes from Volume 6 of the Testimonies, page 195. Before the overflowing scourge shall come upon the dwellers of the earth, the Lord calls upon all who are Israelites indeed to prepare for that event. So before the overflowing scourge comes, we must prepare for it. Now's the time to do it. To parents, he sends the warning cry, gather your children into your own houses. Gather them away from those who are disregarding the commandments of God, who are teaching and practicing evil. Get out of the large cities as fast as possible. So this is our warning message today. May God bless you. May God help you. May God give you wisdom to move quickly, and may He show you the place where you need to go. All right, that's it for today's update. We will have more as updates fulfill prophecy and as we see them. God bless.